You guys have been supporting the work in India that I direct, and uh, I was here a few years back and did a presentation, but I'm real glad to be back with you. A lot of things have uh, evolved and gotten even more effective in our work in India since that time. You guys have been so faithful in monthly contribution. We're a part of your mission program, and we just appreciate that so much. And I'm going to be saying that several times to you. I just want to give you a little overview of our India mission work. My first trip to India was in 1984. Last 20 years, I've been going every year. In the early years, I would go every other year. The Woodsfield Church of Christ, which I was the preacher for at that time, was overseeing the work. When I moved to Whitehall Church of Christ in Fairmont, the work got transferred as far as overseeing church is concerned to the Whitehall Church of Christ in Fairmont, West Virginia. All monies and contributions go through the elders there, and they work with me in giving direction to the work in India. I do, as I just said, travel each year to India. Sometimes I've been there a couple times a year. I am also the pulpit preacher and one of the elders of the Bates Hill Church of Christ in Sayersville, Ohio. So I wear a couple of different hats, and just to let you know that Bates Hill congregation is very flexible in allowing me the time to come here and talk to you, report on the work to contributing congregations and that sort of thing, and to be gone in India. The Bates Hill Church and my wife are very flexible about that, and thank God for both of them. Hey, the Whitehall Church of Christ, of course, is our overseeing congregation, and I am the director of the program. We have a mission statement for our work that we're doing in India, and that mission statement is basically composed of two passages of Scripture. Matthew's account of Jesus' Great Commission, Matthew 28:18 through 20. All power has been given to me in heaven and earth. Go ye therefore make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you. Now that's our mission statement for the India evangelism program that we're involved in. We have another passage that fits in there because over the years we've had to do. If you're going to work in a third world country like India, you're going to have to get involved in benevolence. So James 1:27 is also a part of our mission statement, that we take care of widows and orphans in their affliction, and so we make that a part of our mission statement. Now, we work here in India, is the nation that we have targeted, and we've targeted India because it is the most receptive nation in the world to the gospel of Jesus Christ. We can't, of course, our program does not focus on the entire nation of India, but it does focus on I'm trying to get that to come up. It won't come up. There's supposed to be an arrow come up right here that would point to this green state in India, down in the southeast part of India, that is the state of Andhra Pradesh. About 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, they divided the state of Andhra Pradesh into two states, Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. Those two states we work in. We've got gospel preachers in those states, as well as the state to the south, which is Tamil Nadu. I doubt if you can read that up there. Well, maybe you can. It's a little bigger up there on that screen. But Tamil Nadu is the state to the south. We have missionaries, native missionaries working there. And Karnataka off to the west. We have a couple of graduates from our School of Preaching are working in Karnataka. So we basically have 30 gospel preachers that we stipend or support. We support our preachers basically about $100 per month. That's the lowest stipend we give. Now, guys that are doing double duty, like some of our teachers in our preacher training school who are also our supported preachers, will add another $50 a month to their salary. Like our administrator and my translator, and I have to have a translator to communicate with all of our people, he'll get another $50 for being the translator and administrator of our orphanage, which I want to talk to you a little bit about here in just a moment. And our director, our native director, Brother Yu Israel of Nkulu, of course, his responsibilities demand, a little higher support. But basically what we try to do is stipend our guys. I'm trying my best. After 40 years, I've been working at this and developing this program for the last 40 years. We're trying to get the churches to understand the need to be self-supporting. We're trying to get, we only give a portion of salary to these preachers, and we expect their congregations to learn to make up the difference. As a matter of fact, we started a program of cutting back all of our preachers about 20% of their salary each year, with the agreement from the congregations that they work with that they might, make up that difference. If they would, then we would cut back the 20%, and the congregation would make up the difference. But when COVID hit, all of that kind of went aside, and we haven't been able to get back on that program like I want to. This year, I hope to get us more focused, get all of our folks in India more focused on the being self-supporting. It's up to the preachers to teach their congregations their need. All they've ever known in India, the Churches of Christ, from the early 1960s, there was not a single Church of Christ in India in the early 1960s. J.C. Bailey, a Canadian man, moved over to India, brother in Christ, and preached the gospel there, began converting people by the hundreds, and other brothers became a part of that, and it's developed now into the fact there are more congregations of the Church of Christ in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. There's more congregations of the Church of Christ than there are in the Bible Belt in the United States. More congregations than in Alabama, Texas, Tennessee, and put all those together. Of course, they are buried in 1.7 billion population, the largest population, China and India, they go back and forth, being the largest nation. But India, of course, is the most receptive place in the world. Let me talk about our mission statement just a little bit. The idea of making disciples. If you're going to, if your mission is to make disciples, you are in the right place when you are in India. You can gather crowds of people together in India, just letting them know that you want to talk about religion. They're so much like the people in Athens in Acts chapter 17 when Paul went to Athens. Remember how he said, you're very religious people? Well, that certainly is true in India. I mean, everybody they may be 95% Hindu, 2% Muslim, and then 2% some flavor of Christianity or Christendom, but everybody's something religiously. And I mean, they know what dedication and commitment to their religion is. And so, you talk to somebody about, we're going to preach Christianity, and they don't know much about it. We're going to preach the gospel. You can get a crowd of people. Well, as you can see, I'm up here preaching away, and that's my translator beside me there in that particular picture up there in the, I guess it'd be on your right. And so, we're always able to get a crowds like this. Crowds like this we can get. That's the Nkulu church building, better known as the Harry Glenn Summers Prayer Hall. My mother, after the death of my father, provided the money to build that building. And we'll talk a little bit about building buildings here in just a minute. But there's over 400 people present on that Sunday morning. I was doing the preaching that Sunday morning when I snapped that picture. But they had, now that's not the typical attendance on a Sunday morning at the Nkulu Church of Christ, but several congregations from nearby villages had set their worship service aside and came to the Nkulu Church. It was kind of a combined attendance, and we had just a tremendous, but you can get crowds like that out in India because, hey, they are teachable people. I mean, I don't care if they're Hindu, I don't care if they're Muslim, I don't care if they're some denominational part of some, because the denominations have been in India much longer than the churches of Christ have been there. And so they're larger, but we have changed the sign on many a denominational church building by simply converting the preacher and then converting the congregations. And I mean, they're quick to follow what Scripture says about how to be saved, how to worship God, what the structure of the church really is. And so we make disciples that way. And the next of those 5 things in our mission statement, you not only go and make disciples of all the nations, but you baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. I'm going to tell you right now something that's going to be hard for you to believe, but this mission work that you guys support on a monthly basis, and I'm so grateful and thankful for the Sunset Church doing that. We are baptizing well over 3,000, between 3,000 and 4,000 a year that we're baptizing into Christ that I have record of. Now that's just talking about the 30 stipend gospel preachers and the gospel meetings they're holding. And most of them hold 3, 4, sometimes even 5 gospel meetings in a month. When I say gospel meeting, I'm talking about a one-service gospel sermon. That's what a gospel meeting is in India. And they will get responses, 3,000 to 4,000 in one year. And we get monthly reports from each of our 30 preachers telling us what they've accomplished. But they not only baptize folks, lead people to Christ in their gospel meetings, they also lead people to Christ in their local work. And the churches are growing. As I told you a little bit ago, we have more congregations of the Church of Christ in the 3 states we're working in, 4 states actually, in India than in the Bible Belt in the United States, and more practicing members. I'm talking about breaking bread every first day of the week, members of the Church of Christ in that country. And we baptize these folks in the name of Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of their sins. When I make a trip over to India, I will usually preach maybe 35 gospel meetings, as well as checking out the work. I go over there to hold all of our preachers accountable for the work they've reported over the past year since I was there the last time. But they always have gospel meetings set up for me in the congregations where they minister. And we have response to the preaching just in these 35 meetings that I preach with a translator. I've had as many as 400, 500 responses for baptism. I'm not even talking about the responses for prayer. I mean, they would be in the thousands, but that many people. The difference between a gospel meeting in India and a gospel meeting in the United States, you get 100 people out for a gospel meeting in the United States, and 98 of them are already members of the Church of Christ, okay? They're already faithful Christians. They're attending your gospel meeting because they're faithful Christians. You got 2 people getting a whole load out there, but in India, it's not that way. You get 100 people together, and there will be less than 50% who are members of the church. I mean, you've got people to preach and preach to out there. And when we ask for, that's the reason we get so much better response. We've got so many more people under the sound of the gospel in India than we do. And you can't get people, lost people, out to gospel meetings in the U.S., but you can in India. And that's why we're being so successful baptizing people into Christ. And incidentally, I know what's on your mind right now. If you got a question, I hope I have time for some question and answers. But I know what question you'd be thinking. Well, how many of them do you keep? You know, how many do you retain? Well, like I told you a little bit ago, in India, everybody's religious. And I've done one study of retention rate after 2 years. We had 87% still breaking bread 2 years after they were baptized into Christ. 87% of those we had baptized 2 years earlier. And my preachers tell me, the native missionaries in India, that it actually is probably better than that. Those that we would say we don't have anymore are people that had to move away because of work, you know, and things like that. And we just didn't have record of whether they were still faithful or not. And so it's just an unbelievable situation. We also have in our, and we're talking about making disciples and teaching them to observe all things whatsoever we can do. We have a preacher training school in Nkulu. Brother Israel, our native director, is the director of that school, and we have, you can see the grand poobahs sitting there with their green, and I'm right in the middle of them there. I'm the guy, a little different color than everybody else. I'm the minority in India, okay? And so that's just how it works, okay? That's how it goes. And so anyway, this is just half of a graduating class that we've got here. Actually, we have 20 students in our preacher training school. We use the same type curriculum that the Sunset Church of Christ or Sunset School of Preaching or Sunset International Bible Institute now uses. We use basically the same curriculum that they use and with a few little different changes. And we graduate about 20 every 2.5 years. We've got 80 graduates of the School of Preaching. I gotta share this with you. Of those 80 graduates from the School of Preaching, and we don't require reports from them because we don't support them. We only support the 30 preachers that I showed you the list of a little bit ago. The people go through our preacher training school. You know, we fund the school while they're there, but we don't support them on a regular basis, so we don't require them to send us reports. However, we do keep track of them. Brother Israel does. We know of 100 new congregations of the Church of Christ that have been established just by our 80 graduates from the preacher training school. 100. You think we've lost more than 100 congregations in the United States, and they have started over 100. Now, that's not even talking about the congregations that we have established with our supported preachers, which are at least that many. But I'm just telling you, these guys, I'd put these preachers, these graduates up against any preacher in the U.S. I mean, I would, for their Bible knowledge, their commitment. Their work will bury any preacher. I mean, if our preachers were required to do the things these guys do, they'll hold 3, 4, 5 gospel meetings, plus do their local work, their hospital visiting, their house visiting, their absentee visiting, their local ministry. They are ministers of the Word of God. And so we're cranking them out. And incidentally, this school, it's a 5-day-a-month school. So you can imagine the intensity. We give them the same kind of memory work, the same kind of theme writing, the same kind of study that we give to students here in the U.S. Okay, right here. We do, when our guys graduate, one thing we do is we present each one of them with a bicycle. A bicycle is not a toy in India. It's a major means, especially in the villages, a major means of transportation. So we present a new bicycle to each graduate, every graduating class. Another thing we do, and we're talking now about, teaching them to observe all things. Every new convert that we make, we give a Bible and a songbook. Things aren't the same in India as they are in the U.S. In India, you don't have pews to set in with songbooks in the pews. So we have published a songbook. Some of the songs in our Telugu or Tamil songbooks, because in Tamil Nadu, they speak the language of Tamil. In Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, they speak Telugu. So we've done songbooks in Telugu and Tamil that some of our preachers have written some of the songs that we've got in there. Singing's a little bit different in the Telugu language than it is in English, but it's beautiful. And so we give a songbook to every new convert and a Bible. These Bibles cost us about $3.50 a piece, and they $1.50 a piece for our songbooks, a paperback songbook. And so that comes out roughly to $18,000 to $20,000 a year as a part of our budget to provide these for our new converts. And of course, there are other people that we end up distributing these Bibles and songbooks to besides our new converts. And so that's a part of what your money goes toward, is the purchase of these Bibles and these songbooks. And I tell you what, it's a big deal when you present a Bible and a songbook to somebody still dripping wet from the water when you baptized them into Christ, and you're presenting them with this songbook and this. But you can see on the face of that girl there, the joy of receiving that. I'm handing out a songbook and a Bible to that young man that we just baptized, and that older fella down there below. Let's go now. Okay, let's go to our James 1:27. Part of our mission statement, to visit the fatherless and the widows in their affliction. And we do that with our orphanage, for one thing. We've got an orphanage of 65 children. These are true orphans. These are not just poor kids whose parents have left them off for us to take care of. Not one of them has a father or mother living, or at least that we can find, okay? And so we take care of these, and and I'll show you, during the sermon time, I'll show you a picture of them when we first got started. This is kind of a recent picture. They've grown up in our orphanage. Our orphanage is about 10 years old, and so we've had these kids now for all these years. We're bringing them up. Our goal is no kid will leave this orphanage that has not become a faithful Christian as an adult when they leave our orphanage. And that's our goal, and so far we've been able to pretty well do that very thing. But this is me. They're my kids, and I just have the name of the orphanage, and this, I had nothing to do with this. My wife says it's got to come to an end, but it's called the Harry and Arlene Summers Orphanage. Well, and so they think that I'm their dad, okay? They're my kids. So that's just how it goes. And we've raised them from just childhood. Hey, another thing we do, we're taking care, it's $2,000 a month goes into the feeding, the clothing, and I just sent, in addition to the $2,000, I just sent this past week for the kids in the orphanage, I sent $1,910. That's $30 a piece for Christmas gifts for each of the kids. Anybody wants to write a check out for that, we could replace the money we took out of the regular fund for that, okay? But anyway, we do that every year, And our Christmas gifts are not toys. These kids wouldn't a bit more appreciate a toy. We get them a change of clothing, a nice set of clothing, and they appreciate that more than anything you ever saw. And so we totally take care of these. And we also are involved in widows. Every trip that I make to India, we pick a different congregation each time. And usually in our poorest villages, and most of our churches are in poor villages. There are some exceptions. We have a couple in major cities and towns. But in the villages, we pick one church, and every widow and widower in that congregation, we purchase a change of clothing for. That's what I'm doing there, is handing a new sari out to these ladies. And the only clothes they have is the clothes on their back, more than likely. And I'm handing them a whole change of clothing, a new one. I mean, you'd think I'd bought them a Cadillac. I mean, they are just thrilled to death with that. So we try to do that with the widows. And this helps us so much in our evangelism. Taking care of the widows, taking care of the orphans. It makes people so receptive in the villages where they know about this. Hey, I want to know something about this church that's helping the widows and taking care of these orphans. And so that's kind of how it goes there. And also we work in a leper colony. I made my first trip in May of 1984. I visited a leper colony near Pattabram, near Chennai, India. And I've been going to that leper colony every trip I make, which has been well over 30 trips. I don't know just how many. I lost count a long time ago. But I always go to the leper colony. We've got a little congregation in this leper colony of about 30 members. The leper colony itself has about 135 lepers living in it. We provide money each month for, you see me handing out the rice there. We buy several hundred pounds or kilograms, as it's measured in India, of rice, and we hand that out to the lepers each month. And also we pay utility bills and do what we can. But we have baptized about 30, 35 members. And we send one of our supported preachers every Sunday, goes out and conducts worship service at the leper colony. Hey, if I got to stop, somebody's got to tell me to stop. How much? 15 minutes? Oh, man, that is great. Oh, okay, all right. That is a surprise. Okay.
Hear a couple of bells ring if you get a chance.
Oh, okay. Yeah, if we take a breath, huh? Yeah. Well, I just got so much I want to tell you about the work. And I know I've told you this several years, but if you're like me, you don't remember what I said when I was here the last time, okay? I don't even remember what I said, so I don't expect you to. Hey, another thing we do in our ministry, we build one church building, or help to build one church building every year. Now, a church building, I'm cutting the ribbon here and opening a church building that we built. A church building, we give $10,000 to the building of at least one church building every year. That $10,000 helps them. Probably the building when it's finished would be $12,000, maybe $13,000 if it was a little fancier. But we give 10 towards that. If the church itself doesn't sacrifice and put something into that, it doesn't seem like their own, okay? And so we help build that building to the tune of about $10,000 each year. That's a church building, and it costs what it costs because we put a concrete roof on the top of it. It would hold 300, 400 people the way Indians pack in, okay, which is a little bit like sardines in a sardine can. I mean, we don't sit in pews and chairs most of the time, so you can get a lot more people in a building, setting them on the floor, you know. And so anyway, that's how we do it. And we do at least one of those. And we also do one, what we call a prayer shed. Now down in the right side, that's a prayer shed. And we build one of those. We give $6,000 toward the building of a prayer shed. The difference between a prayer shed and a church building is not only the size, but it's a gabled roof. Like you can see there, maybe it's fiberglass or maybe tin or whatever, we give $6,000 towards that, and that just helps to build it. And it's a smaller, that's for smaller congregations of about 100. It'll hold about 100 comfortably, whereas the other one would go up to 300 or more. And they love that concrete slab roof because a lot of their services are held on the roof. You get a lot more air, ventilation, and so they love worshiping outside, up on that concrete slab roof. But of course, in the prayer shed, you can't do that. Everybody gets in there and sweats and just endures a great worship service. And I love to watch Indians worship. It's not like people don't fall asleep, and well, I have seen some fall asleep, but they get into worship, those that we have converted. So that's that. And here's another thing we do. We buy a bicycle for all of our graduates from the preaching school. But all of our supported preachers over the years, we buy one motorcycle a year till we've gotten all 30 of our preachers cycled up. We got everybody cycled up, okay? It's a 110cc Hero Honda motorcycle, which when I present that to those preachers, it's like giving them a new car. Incidentally, we do have a car. We do have a SUV that we purchased for getting our orphans to the doctor and to school and to getting them around, but and also getting some of the preachers to their meetings and stuff. But anyway, the motorcycles we get, I'm presenting this motorcycle to Brother M. David, one of our supported preachers, and he was one. But now, here's the thing. We started doing this about 30 years ago, and the first motorcycles we gave, they're wore out. It's time to start redoing all this. I'm spending more money repairing the old motorcycles that they just run the tires off of than a new motorcycle would cost. So we're having to replace them. But we try to do one motorcycle a year. We try to do one church building a year. We try to do one prayer shed a year. And so that's just the way it works with us. Does anybody have some questions? Yeah, Terry.
I was going to ask, is the motorcycle for the preacher of that congregation?
The motorcycle is presented to the preachers, our 30 preachers. Yes, dear.
Some of the preachers will hold Sunday morning services for as many as
Oh, yeah.
or 5
Thank you.
congregations, and they're not close.
Yeah.
And so the motorcycles, so they can drive to this village and preach,
And
to this village,
go for their gospel meetings.
this village and preach, because otherwise they would be hindered on just their.
Our guys could never hold 4, 5 gospel meetings without transportation. You can't pedal a bicycle that fast, Jerry. So, the motorcycle is one of the greatest tools we've presented. And we're the only work in India I know that's doing that for all their preachers. Everybody gets a bicycle for their guys when they're working in the India work, but we get motorcycles for ours, And I know one congregation that builds church buildings without walls and expects the church, we build church buildings with walls. That's just how we're going to do it. Yes, brother.
Question from a brother online. He was asking, how does Christianity receive there versus the caste system?
The caste system, according to India people, is no longer there. As far as I've observed, the caste system is still there. But Christianity, that's the thing. You go into a village and your first converts are lower caste type people. It's real tough to bring the upper caste people into that congregation. But we can't pay any attention to that. Whoever's receptive, that's who we're going to preach to. But I know it's not what it used to be. Gandhi changed that. But it's still in the minds of people. Yes, brother.
My question is, why is India so receptive to the gospel compared to other countries?
I ask myself that question all the time. I'm a little embarrassed when I give reports like this because I know the stuff I'm saying is hard to believe. But I've been there and I know that I'm telling you the truth. I think the answer to the question, mine and your question, both, about why they're so receptive, it's just such a religious culture. Yeah, you're born a Hindu, okay? You're just born a Hindu. That means you're gonna worship whatever idol or whatever god, and they got a million gods. I mean, good night. I've tried to get into a village and it'd be a big rock out in front of the road to get into the village late at night. I say, well, get out and move that. No, that's the village god. That's protecting the village during the night. You know, we'll get stoned to death if we move that rock. And so, I mean, there's still that kind of stuff going on. I'll show some idols during the worship time. But the answer to your question is it's just a religious culture. You convert a Hindu, he puts just as much effort into being a Christian as he put into being a Hindu. You convert even the Muslims and we've converted several Muslims to Jesus Christ in India, and that's an unbelievable thing. I've seen some Muslims come into our service and I thought, ooh, this is going to be a problem. But the preachers will always, no, they've been coming here for a while. Preach to them, and then sure enough, you offer the invitation and they respond. I mean, and I just dropped my mouth. I can't believe it. Yes, sister.
Did you say, what is the difference between a prayer shed and a church building?
We call it a prayer shed just to distinguish it from a church building. The church building, it's large enough to house probably 300 to 400 people. And the prayer shed, though, doesn't have the concrete slab roof. The concrete slab roof is what costs so much. See, but the prayer shed just has a gabled roof. It just has, let me see where I've got it here. I know I've got, right. Yeah, see the roof, that's the prayer shed down there on the right. That's well, you can't see the roof up there to the right, but I'm cutting the ribbon to open up into the prayer shed. Yes, brother.
Yeah, so I'm understanding they're learning English more in India.
Yes.
Information we were receiving a few years ago.
Yeah. Good question. You are taught English in India from first grade on. Okay, you're taught English. My translator told me, actually on our last trip, he said, Brother Harry, 70% of the people out there that you're preaching to and I'm translating into Telugu understand parts of what you're saying. They can't talk to you because it's just like you taking Spanish in high school or something. Yeah, you know a little Spanish, but you can't hold a conversation. Well, a lot of it's like that in India. And he says 70% are hearing you preach in English, but they're really understanding it when I translate into Telugu. And my translator, he's something to behold. He's a preacher to boot, but he went to a preacher training school that is English medium, which means all of his study was in English. And actually him and his fellow students preached to one another and translated for one another. They'd preach in English and translate to Telugu, and then preach in Telugu and translate to English. And that's the way they were trained to preach. And they study their Bible in English. But they speak Telugu fluently. And I mean, when I stomp, snort, and shout, Ashok stomps, snorts, and shouts. I mean, when I quote he makes me go over every sermon I'm going to preach while we're still back at the house. He makes me preach it. I mean, every scripture. If I'm quoting a passage in the thing and he doesn't know that by memory, he will memorize that passage. So he's going to be able to quote it when we get out and actually preach to me. And I mean, he's just fantastic. I had a great translator before Ashok. Ashok's a younger man. N.B. Sundarrao was my translator for years. And he passed away about 2000. But yeah, and so about maybe 2005. And Ashok has taken his place. Ashok is the son of our native director, Brother Israel. But yes, the English is getting better and better, but Telugu, Tamil, there's actually 7 languages in India, and depends on what state you're in. We go down to Tamil, and they do. I have to have a 3-way translation. I do my thing in English, and Brother J. Rao, or Brother Ashok does his thing in Telugu because he can't do Tamil, and then Brother J. Rao does the Tamil. So it's a 3-way translation. By the time they get back to me, I've forgotten where I was in the sermon. But that's just that's how it goes. But Ashok and I are able to get in a rhythm, and I think the preaching is as effective in India as it is if I were just preaching in English. Matter of fact, I sometimes think he makes my sermon better than if I would just preach, because he knows what he's doing. You know, he knows what words to use to translate what I'm saying so much better than if I just had, somebody that could speak English translating. He's a preacher. He knows what reconciliation means. He knows what redemption means. He knows what, propitiation means. He knows these Bible words and how to put them into the Telugu. Yes, brother.
How about the currency, like the American dollar, US dollar?
Better right now than it has been. When I first went over there, we used to think we were doing good if we got 60 rupees to the dollar. Right now, we're getting like over 70 rupees to the dollar. So they're doing, is it 80 now?
It's 83.
Yeah, well, down in Chennai, I think they cheat me a little bit. Oh, was it? Did you check? Okay, that's great. And that really helps our people when we send the money over. Because I base everything we do. We send $6,500 every month. That's the basic budget. That has to go, $6,000. But there's always extra. Like this month, had to do the 1910 for the Christmas gifts. We always have something, here's money, here's $1,500 for a motorcycle, or here's $10,000 if we're going to build that building up in Varayalapalam, or something like that. But we make out with it, and I didn't know we were up to 80, but that's great. I knew it'd been climbing. Last time I was there, it was like 71 or 72. That was in March of this year. So that's great. Yes?
You're not gonna say this in your sermon, tell them about how you had to buy the thing for the guy that threw you.
Well, I'm going to have that, but you'll see. I won't have time in the sermon to tell the story. I was preaching this past Easter. It was Easter Sunday morning, and I was out. They took me out to a congregation that I'd actually been a part of starting. It was in a village where they asked me to come and preach when I was over there. Brother S. Samuel, one of our preachers, had been working there. He said, now they're all Hindus. I don't think we're going to get much response. But he said, if you come out and you just preach, let's see what happens. Well, I got out there right in front of a Hindu temple. The Hindu holy men were there. And we had the biggest crowd of people in this little village, Yeravarapalam, I think is what it's called. And anyway, I preached a sermon. Can't even remember what the title of that was, but it really impressed them. I wasn't that impressive when I preached at Bates Hill, but they really liked it in India, and 24 responded to the invitation when we offered the invitation. 24 responses. Every one of them was a Hindu. Yeah, every one of them. And they got all excited. So we started the church. Brother Samuel said, I'll come here every Sunday. This will be one of my congregations. I'll be here, conduct worship service, break the bread with them. We'll just have worship here each Lord's Day. The church started. And of course, it was only a month or so before I was getting reports back from him. Hey, we've grown to this size. We need a building. Help us build a building. Actually, that's the building. No, it'd be the one I show in the sermon. I'm cutting the ribbon at that building on Easter Sunday morning, this past Easter. in April, and I'm cutting that ribbon. And we go in there, and that's going in the building. When you're cutting the ribbon, do the same thing. They read a particular psalm. It's the same psalm every time. There's then Brother Israel will have a prayer. I'll have a prayer. Then we march in as everybody sings, and I have no idea what they're singing because it's in Telugu. And we march around that building inside, and then everybody sits down, and then I get up and preach, me and Ashok. And so that's every time you open a building. But on that day, on the day, that Easter Sunday, a fella had come who wasn't a member of the church. He was paralyzed. And the only way he could get around was a four-wheeler vehicle, hand pedaled. You pedal with your hands. He couldn't pedal with his feet. So the pedals are up here. But it was broke. And so just in bad repair. But anyway, when we offered the invitation, two people that day responded. I preached on the resurrection. It was Easter, hey. I preached on the resurrection, and so that two responded, and he was one of them. So we took him out to this water, this reservoir there at the village to baptize him, and we were talking about how are we going to get him down over this steep hill and into that water to baptize him. Big, heavy guy. You'll see a picture of him later. And heavy guy. And how will we get him down there? While we're down there talking about it, he pulls himself off of that four-wheeler, gets to the edge of that bank and hurls himself over, rolls down there to the water and said, "Baptize me." And so we drag him out in the water. I mean, he's totally paralyzed. And he could use his arms and pedal that thing. And we baptized him there in that muddy water in that village. And I mean, he's thrilled. We since have bought him a new hand pedal, $400 hand pedal thing that he can get around in now. But he's a faithful member of that church now. But that's how desperately that man wanted to be baptized into Christ. After one sermon, he had never been to that church. Well, we were just opening the building for the first time on that Easter Sunday morning. But that congregation's growing, going, and glowing. I mean, they're making real headway. Any other questions? Surely you got some other question. Okay, well, things are going great. I haven't heard that bell yet, so yes. Oh, did it? I'm sorry. I got my hearing aids in, okay. You can't hear it up here, okay. Yeah, you need hearing aids too, brother. Okay, yes, brother.
Like your church buildings, do you have running water and restrooms and everything?
No, in the villages, most of the time not. We're lucky if we've got electricity in some of those villages. But, I mean, we got different kinds. We've got places in Chennai, churches where we're supporting the preachers and stuff. I mean, it's just like being in America. But you get out into the rural villages where most of our work is done. That's where people are the most receptive. Most of the people are field workers. They harvest whatever's being harvested, chili peppers or tobacco or corn or whatever happens to be being harvested at that time. And so that's what they do for a living. And it's a poor setting. We had been trying to put a baptistry in with these new buildings normally. If we get a baptistry, the only way to fill it is you haul water from the nearest water source in big buckets and you fill that baptistry up to it. But for the most part, we go out to reservoirs. Each village will have a reservoir where they wash their water buffaloes and stuff and all of that. But yeah, we don't, and the toilet is usually an Asian toilet, which is just a hole in the floor and in the ground. Yes?
Online, when do you get a lot of conversions from Islam?
Do I get a what now?
A lot of conversions from
Not a lot, because only, see, while there's 95% Hindu in India, there's less than 2% Muslims, so obviously we're not getting that number of people out. But I have baptized, I can't tell you the exact number, several Muslims, and our guys work with Muslims when they can. And it's not the same. I've been to Saudi Arabia on a couple of mission trips. I've been to the United Arab Emirates. I've been to Muslim countries. And I know when I was there, I was forbidden to say anything about the gospel to anybody other than the expats that were working for Aramco Oil Company. But India is not that way. I mean, they consider themselves a democracy with freedom of religion, and so they allow you to preach to any kind of a Hindu or a Muslim or a denominational person or anybody. Now they don't particularly, the government doesn't particularly like it when you do that, but we are able to do it. And I haven't ended up in jail yet. I have had the police waiting for me at the house I stay in a few times, wanting to know, you're here on a visitor's visa. You're not allowed to do religious things like this. And they'll say that several times. And finally I'll say to my translator, what is it going to take to make him get off of our case? He says, let me talk to him. And he'll come back a little bit later and he said, about $75 will do it, he said. And as soon as the guy gets the $75 to get him off, then all of a sudden, I want to thank you for all of the good things you're doing for our nation. You know, so and I know a lot of people don't like the idea of bribes, and I don't like the idea of bribes. But you learn in mission work, you got to do what you got to do. I mean, you're trying to preach the gospel, and you can either go to jail. I guess we could do that. I mean, you know, but one time my translator said to me, let's go to Karnataka. I said, didn't they burn the preacher's house down over in Karnataka not long ago? He said, yes. He said the worst that will happen to us is we might get beaten, but we'll be okay. I said, we're going to go get beaten? He said, don't worry, brother, I'll take the beating with you, he said. So that's their idea of getting over the persecution. We didn't get beaten, though. We had to run from the RSS, but we did not get beaten. But we were baptizing, the RSS saw us and went up and down the road. And finally Israel said, we got to get out of here. And so after we got everybody baptized, we jumped in that car. As soon as we got across the border from Karnataka back into Telangana, no problem. And they wouldn't follow us over there. That state's totally, each state is governed individually. Any other question if we got the time? You think we're done? My wife says I'm done. So, and when she says you're done, you're done. Trust me. Okay.